Hello everyone, peace be upon you. Before we begin, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe, and stay with me until the end of the story. Also, leave a comment telling me which city and country you're watching from. I'd love to see how far my story has reached. For those of you who have already subscribed, I sincerely wish you good health, ease in all your affairs, abundant blessings, and may all your hopes and dreams come true. Amen. Now, let's begin the story. The morning light in Maple Ridge came in quiet and honest, washing over the wheat fields and the two-bay garage where Robert Sanders kept a coffee can full of bolts and a lifetime of small-town stories. Evelyn grew up there, between the hiss of air compressors and the soft scratch of Diane's grating pen at the kitchen table. It wasn't fancy, but it ran on steady hands and kept promises. When other kids talked about moving to big cities, Ev just tightened the last lug nut and asked her dad for the torque spec. She liked things done right the first time. At school she ran laps before dawn, rain or frost, a hood pulled tight and eyes forward. People noticed. Some cheered, some smirked. Diane would set a plate on the table and say, "You don't have to prove anything to anybody," and Ev would nod, even as she laced her shoes for the next day. Robert said less, but every once in a while he'd raise his chin and give a short nod that meant keep going. When the letter from the U.S. Army Academy at Riverstone came, Ev opened it on the back steps with grease on her knuckles. Diane cried first. Robert read the page twice, lips pressed thin, then folded it carefully and handed it back. "All right," he said. "Then we're doing this all the way." Riverstone sat below hard blue sky and cold stone. The first minute swallowed her whole, barking orders, boots hitting pavement, names shouted, numbers checked. Major Bill Harding looked like he had been carved out of the mountains behind him. He didn't smile when he spoke to her. He didn't need to. "You'll think about quitting," he said on day one. "That's fine. You can think while you run." Ev learned the rhythm. Eyes up. Chin in. Bunk tight enough to bounce a coin. She learned the difference between loud and clear. She learned who cracked under pressure and who got quiet and useful. Ryan Keller, a cadet with a clean salute and a sharper tongue, tested her early. "Careful, Sanders. Wouldn't want to scuff your boots." She didn't fire back. She made time on the obstacle course and let the stopwatch do the talking. After that, Keller still watched her, but the edge dulled. Weeks stacked into months. Ev wasn't the strongest at everything, but she was never the weakest at anything, and that balance earned looks from the cadre. Harding started asking her opinion during field problems. "Map, terrain, weather. What do you see?" She kept answers short. No drama, just facts. When the winter survival rotation hit and half the platoon went glassy-eyed in the wind, Ev kept the pace and checked hands for feeling. She didn't grandstand. She counted heads, moved them along, and brought them back. On breaks she called home from a noisy hallway. Diane asked about sleep. Robert asked about boots. Ev always said she was fine. It wasn't always true, but it was never a lie. Fine meant she could still put one foot in front of the other. That was enough. Her first summer detail at Fort Ridgewell showed her the desert's blunt honesty. Everything out there told the truth: sun, dust, distance. She memorized the base layout, watched gate protocol, and noticed how a well-run post sounded: radios clipped, engines idling, orders given once. She also noticed faces at the gate looking past her for someone older, taller, male. It didn't sting. It noted itself in the same place she kept run times and grid references. By senior year, Ev wore responsibility like a tool she'd broken in. Harding didn't soften, he didn't need to. "You want command, you carry people, not just plans," he said, handing her a clipboard and a problem set no one would solve perfectly. She solved it well enough and left no one behind. Ryan came by later, awkward in the doorway. "You were right about the route," he said. She just nodded. There was still laundry to fold and a rifle to clean. Graduation came with handshakes and photos no one would frame perfectly straight. Out on the parade field, Diane squeezed Ev's hand and whispered a prayer. Robert stood at attention like the day demanded it. When Ev saluted and lowered her arm, the line of her future felt simple: report, learn, lead, repeat. Orders would come. Duty stations would change. The work would stay the work. That night she packed a small bag, checked it twice, and set her alarm. In the morning she would step into a world that didn't owe her anything and test whether all those quiet choices would hold under real weight. She didn't rehearse speeches or picture applause. She pictured a gate, a clipboard, 2 names to learn, and a job to do right the first time, and then the desert reminded her that nothing stays on paper. Fort Ridgewell hit like a blast furnace. Engines coughed, rotors chopped the air, and sand worked under every seam. Ev checked her roster and met Sergeant Noah Grant, the kind of NCO who measured people by what they did at 0400. He kept it short. "We move clean, ma'am." She nodded. Clean was the plan. The endurance phase started at sunrise. 12 soldiers, 3 vehicles, water rationed tight, radios checked twice. The route climbed a brittle ridge of rock and loose sand. Ev went first on the rope, set anchors, called pace. The wind kicked in hard. Goggles fogged, voices thinned. Halfway up, her boot slid on a patch that looked solid and wasn't. Weight shifted, rope snapped tight, rock gave way. She dropped fast, stone, grit, sky, stone, until the ground hit back and all the air left her chest at once. "Captain down." Grant's voice cut through the static. She tried to stand. Her leg refused. Heat and white noise roared in her skull. A jagged edge had torn deep into her thigh, blood soaked the fabric in a spreading dark. Ev tasted copper and dust. "I'm fine," she said, and knew it wasn't true. The medic slid in, hands steady. "Compound fracture. We need evac now." Ev stared at the ridge she'd chosen and hated the distance between decision and consequence. They hauled her out by dusk. The field tent smelled like alcohol and rubber. A fan ticked overhead, lazy as a metronome. The surgeon spoke in a voice built for bad news. "Surgery tonight. Months of rehab. Maybe more." After that there were hours she didn't remember, and then a ceiling she knew too well. Days piled up like sandbags. She learned the rhythm of pain meds wearing off and the hard line where she told them to stop. At night, when the ward went quiet, she clamped the bed rail and stood. If she could stand, she could walk. If she could walk, she could lead. Grant visited between patrols. He never stayed long. "Platoon squared away," he said. "They're waiting on you." She nodded and gripped the walker until the metal warmed. Diane called and prayed over the phone. Robert asked about the brace and told her to oil the hinges. Ev listened, breathed, counted to 10, and took another step. Therapy became a new kind of field problem. Balance drills, bands, ice, repeat. The therapist tried to slow her down. She kept pace with her own stubborn clock. Fear showed up some mornings, quiet and practical. What if the leg never trusted her again? She bargained with it. One more step. One more lap. The limp shrank from a sentence to a word, then to a comma. Not gone, but no longer the point. 8 months later she jogged across the tarmac at dawn, uneven but moving, and signed herself back in. The gate guard barely looked up as he waved her through. Small mercy. On the range, the rifle felt familiar in her hands, heavy in a way she could use. She timed, she grouped, she adjusted. Grant watched, arms folded. "Welcome back," he said. It wasn't a cheer. It was a fact. The first mission after light came on an unstable grid square beyond the palm line. Ev briefed it like a checklist: entry, clear, evac. We bring everyone home, she said, and meant it in a way she hadn't understood before: the tent, the brace, and the long nights. They rolled at first light. Kids watched from doorways. The street looked quiet, then didn't. A blast lifted the last Humvee off its axle. Gunfire walked the walls. Ev felt the old leg twinge and ignored it. Left cover. Push the alley. Smoke out, move. It lasted minutes that felt like a year. When it broke, the smoke thinned to crying in silence. 2 wounded, none dead. Ev tied a tourniquet from her sleeve and checked pulses with hands that didn't shake. Grant dragged cover where it mattered and didn't ask for credit. At dusk she climbed to a roof and listened to the desert cool. Grant brought coffee in a dented cup. "You kept them together," he said. Ev watched the horizon go purple. "We kept each other together," she answered, and finally believed it. Back at Ridgewell, the report read clean. Higher noticed. Orders shifted. The path bent toward Nevada and a command with a new name, Camp Ironwood. A gate waited somewhere ahead. So did 2 names to learn and a job to do right the first time. A gate waited somewhere ahead, and at dawn the sign read Camp Ironwood, Nevada. Ev rolled to a stop, dust settling over the hood, and stepped out with orders in a brown folder that had already learned every crease. At the checkpoint a senior guard squared his shoulders. "Ma'am, base access is restricted." Identification. His tag read Becker. The younger one beside him, Riley, looked from her to the folder and back again. Ev kept her tone even. "Evelyn Sanders, reporting as assigned." Becker checked the list. He didn't find her. Protocol tightened his face. Riley shifted, unsure. Ev didn't argue. She handed the sealed orders across the glass. Becker read, swallowed, looked up. "Colonel Sanders, welcome to Camp Ironwood." The barrier lifted. No speeches. No scene. Just a lesson landing where it needed to. Inside, Colonel Richard McConnell shook her hand with the same economy. Silver at the temples, steady eyes, schedule packed to the minute. "You'll start as acting XO, he said. "Logistics, ops, civilian coordination. I'll watch your tempo." She nodded, took the keys, and got to it. Ironwood ran hot, rotations, fuel, medevac, outreach with the nearest town, dust in every hinge. Ev built a board, set priorities, trimmed meetings, walked the line at stupid o'clock. People noticed not because she barked, but because things moved. Trucks left on time. Radios cleared up. Patrols came home less wrung out. Not everyone cheered. The officers' mess carried a different frequency. McConnell's fast-tracking her. PR win. Let's see her first mistake. Ev ignored it and kept score on paper: what improved, what slipped, who needed help, who was sand in the gears. She met Grant by the motor pool before sunrise and after last light. He didn't waste her time. "Alpha's burning out on nights," he said one morning. "Swap schedules by platoon, not by individual." She did. Complaints died in 2 days. Sleep debt fell. Patrol reports tightened. 3 weeks in, a convoy carrying medical supplies dropped off comms between mile markers no one liked. Weather clean. Route standard. Then silence. McConnell was wheels up for a regional brief. The duty phone landed on Ev's desk. She felt the weight and didn't dramatize it. "Spin up a rescue element," she told Ops. "Grant with me. Riley on the radio. Becker, seal the outbound so we don't stack traffic." Someone started to quote protocol. She held up a hand. "We're inside the window." They hit the road at noon, heat mirage wobbling ahead. The ravine found them first, a truck nose down at the bend, another angled sideways, tires shredded, impact marks on the rock. The first round snapped past before anyone announced contact. Ev took cover, mapped angles in her head, counted heartbeats, and spoke in plain sentences. Smoke right. Push along the wall. 2 up, 2 cover. Grant, ladder the civilians back through the gap. It wasn't heroic. It was work. Work made room for luck. The pressure on their flank broke when a squad from Ironwood cut in 2 ridges over, clean and loud. 10 minutes later the fighting thinned to echoes. They hauled bodies, living, thank God, out of the cab. A medic in the convoy blinked sand out of his eyes and said he'd thought they were done. Ev didn't answer. She counted heads, checked for missing, and watched Grant ride herd on the extraction like he was born for it. The last crate of meds came up hand over hand. They weren't leaving anything behind. Back on base, Ev wrote it all down while the grime was still on her sleeves. No fluff, no angles. What failed, the route choice, the timing, the comms relay. What worked, speed, coverage, simple orders, teams that trusted each other. She signed the report and slid it under McConnell's door. He called her in before lunch the next day. You broke sequence, he said. She didn't argue. Yes, sir. He let the silence sit, then put a paper on the desk. You saved 20 people and the cargo the clinic asked for 3 times. Congratulations, Colonel. Effective immediately, you assume command of Camp Ironwood. The room tilted a little, then leveled. Ev saluted. McConnell's mouth moved, maybe a smile, maybe approval, but he kept it brief. You'll do the job. Word moved faster than memos. Some faces went tight, most relaxed. Grant just said, "Ma'am," with the smallest nod. Ev took a walk before the ceremony she didn't ask for. The wind pushed dust along the fence line. At the gate, Becker stood straighter than usual, Riley nearby with a clipboard. Ev stopped beside them. Good post today, she said. Becker looked like he wanted to apologize for day 1. She didn't let him. You followed protocol. Keep doing that. She stepped back to the center of the road and looked at the base the way she had in training, like a map, like a promise, like a test. A gate, a clipboard, 2 names to learn. Same work, bigger reach. That night she sketched the next week on a single page, maintenance, rotations, outreach, a quiet restructure that made sense on the ground. No slogans. No banners. Just a commander with a pen and a plan, and a base ready to move when someone asked clearly, and the asking came sooner than anyone expected. The ceremony was set for tomorrow, but Ev wanted to see Ironwood on a normal morning. No salute lines. No speeches. She drove up before sunrise in plain clothes, hair pulled back, that same brown folder on the passenger seat. At the gate, Becker lifted a hand. Riley stepped out with the clipboard. Ma'am, base access is restricted. Identification. Ev kept her voice even. Evelyn Sanders. Becker checked a list, didn't find it, and his posture went all protocol. Riley glanced at the folder. Ev didn't push. She slid the sealed orders across. Becker read, blinked, straightened. Colonel Sanders, permission to escort you in. Ev nodded once. Permission granted. And good catch. They'd gone 20 yards when the radio cracked wrong. A guard on the outer road called a vehicle loitering past the perimeter markers, engine idling where it shouldn't. Becker slowed. Ev took the handset. This is Sanders. Plate. The description came in pieces, older pickup, mismatched panels, bed covered with a tarp that didn't fit. The driver didn't respond to hails. Ironwood had procedures for this. Ev didn't make a speech. Lock the inner gate. Set traffic to 1 lane. EOD on standby. No one crowds the fence. She handed the radio back and looked at Becker. Take me to the camera feed. They hit the small security room. Grainy video showed the truck just beyond the warning signs, dust lifting around the tires. Riley stood at her shoulder, jaw tight. Could be a lost local, he said. Could be more, Ev answered. We treat it like more until it isn't. She keyed base net. Grant, stand up your quick reaction team. Non-lethal first, but give EOD room. If the driver bolts, we don't chase blind. Copy. Grant's reply came crisp. Copy. A long minute dragged. The pickup inched forward, then stopped again. A second figure stepped from the passenger side and walked to the back. The tarp moved. Becker swore under his breath. Ev felt her pulse and kept her tone flat. Call out on loudspeaker. Stay behind cover. The warning went out. The passenger froze, then raised both hands slowly. The driver didn't move. Ev split the problem in half. Riley, talk me through the kill switch for the outer barrier. Becker, if they floor it, I want the road pinned without a ricochet into town. Blue lights flashed down the perimeter road. Grant's team fanned to positions like they'd rehearsed it 100 times. The passenger shouted something about running out of gas. The tarp lifted another inch. The EOD tech leaned into his mic, could be fertilizer bags. Could be empty. Ev didn't gamble with the maybe. We treat it hot, she said. Passenger complies, keep him there. Driver keeps hands where we can see them. If that tarp moves again, we pop the tires, not the cab. Everything happened at once. The driver reached back, the tarp slid, Grant fired the disable rounds, the truck sagged on ruined tires, and the EOD team moved in behind a shield. 30 seconds later, the call came back. Bags are sand. Nothing wired. Cab is clear. Local delivery crew took a wrong turn and panicked. The room exhaled. Ev didn't. Not yet. Confirm IDs. Contact the sheriff. We'll document and release the vehicle when it's safe. Then we hold a short with every shift about stop lines and callouts. Becker looked wrecked with apology. Ev shook her head. You did it by the book. That's the point. Riley nodded, relief and embarrassment mixing on his face. We almost overreacted. We almost underreacted, Ev said. We did neither. That's a win. She stepped outside into a bright, bare morning. The bass moved in that cleaner rhythm she wanted, no shouting, no drama, just people doing the job. McConnell caught her near the admin building, hands in his pockets, like he'd been watching without getting in the way. Heard your voice on the net, he said. Good net. Ev shrugged. Right place, right time. He tilted his head. No. Right standard, right time. By mid-morning, word about the gate and the truck had already traveled faster than any memo. Some people laughed in relief. Some rolled their eyes at the false alarm. Ev kept her focus small. She walked the perimeter with Becker and Riley, had Grant brief what worked and what didn't, and scheduled a 10-minute huddle for each shift to tighten the routine. No bigger than it needed to be, no smaller than the lesson required. In her office that afternoon, she pulled up the week she'd sketched the night before and added one more line, spot checks at odd hours, commander present sometimes in uniform, sometimes not. She didn't put a name to it. She didn't need to. The base would learn her pattern soon enough, steady, clear, predictable where it mattered, unpredictable where complacency liked to hide. At sunset she called home. Diane wanted to hear about the ceremony. Ev said it would be fine. Robert asked if the hinges on that gate looked like they got enough grease. Ev smiled into the quiet. They will. After the call, she stood at the window and watched ironwood settle. People crossed the yard in twos and threes, tired but squared away. The wind pushed a sheet of dust along the fence like a reminder. She didn't feel bigger than the place. She felt responsible for it. And tomorrow, when the speeches ended and the handshakes were done, the work would be waiting exactly where she'd left it this morning, at a gate, at a clipboard, at 2 names she knew now by heart. The ceremony finally felt like background noise to the real job. Morning came clean. The band played, the flag rose, hands clapped on command. Ev stood where they told her, took the guidon, and kept the remarks short. She thanked McConnell, named the teams by function not by rank, and ended with the same line she used in every briefing: "We keep each other together." Then she stepped off the platform and went back to work. The first week after the scare, she tightened small things. Spot checks at odd hours. Shorter guard rotations. A plain language card at every post that said what to say and who to call when something wasn't right. Becker ran drills without drama. Riley learned the radio like a second language. Grant wrote a 1-page play for quick reaction and taped it inside the ready room door. Ev didn't micromanage. She asked for proof. She wanted numbers, not feelings: fewer missed check-ins, faster response times, fewer fatigue flags on duty rosters. The board and ops started to show green. Outreach mattered too. Ironwood sat near a town that watched the base like weather. Ev met the sheriff, walked the school, and sat with clinic staff to hear about supply runs that always cut it close. She didn't promise what she couldn't deliver. She moved one delivery window and put a liaison on a first-name basis with the head nurse. 2 weeks later a thank-you note came in with a patient's drawing of a helicopter. Ev pinned it to the bulletin board where everyone grabbed coffee. Inside the fence, friction dropped a notch. The motor pool started logging preventive work instead of waiting for breakdowns. The comms shop ran a late shift so patrols didn't lose support after dark. A young lieutenant who had rolled his eyes at Ev's checklists asked for a second copy when he realized the checklist solved his mess faster than a speech. Harding sent a note from Riverstone with 3 words and a period: "Carry people, always." Ev taped it beside the helicopter drawing. She made time for one thing new: a half-hour mentorship block on Fridays with any junior who signed up. No speeches. They brought a problem and left with a plan. Riley came first, nervous, then steady. "I freeze when it gets noisy," he said. Ev nodded. She taught him to plan a sentence ahead and to put his hand on the radio so muscle memory beat panic. Becker came by one morning and stood in the doorway until she looked up. "I owed you an apology," he said. Ev shook her head. "You owed me your best work. You delivered." There were setbacks. One night a fuel truck missed a turn in a dust storm. The driver kept going instead of stopping to call it in. They lost an hour and almost lost the load. Ev brought the team in the next day at 0700, listened, then cut the route into legs with a check at each one. She didn't blame. She changed the system so the next driver had less room to make a bad call. The report she sent up was the same as always: what failed, what worked, what was next. At home, Diane asked about sleep and told her to drink water even when she wasn't thirsty. Robert asked if the gate hinges were quiet yet. "Getting there," Ev said. On Sundays she ran the perimeter road at an easy pace. The leg still talked to her. She let it. Pain was just a note, not the whole song. She finished at the bleachers where new recruits practiced facing movements. She watched them learn left from right and remembered the winter at Riverstone when she learned which way was forward when the map stopped making sense. Recognition came whether she wanted it or not. A regional inspector walked the base with a clipboard and frowned less with each building. "Your numbers match your ground truth," he said, like it surprised him. A memo followed with a commendation for response discipline and community coordination. Ev forwarded it to the team with 2 words: "Good work." Then she deleted the email and went back to the schedule. By the end of the month, Ironwood sounded different. Less yelling, more reporting. Less waiting, more doing. Ev kept the rhythm steady. She taught people how to hand off clean so nights didn't hate days and days didn't blame nights. She learned the names of the chow line and the folks who kept the generators happy because the base ran on those as much as it ran on orders. In the quiet moments, she stood at the window and traced the same loop in her head: plan, brief, execute, review, adjust. She didn't make it fancy. She made it repeatable. One evening, as the sun dropped behind the western berm, Ev walked to the gate. Becker nodded. Riley logged plate numbers without looking down. Traffic flowed in an orderly line. The hinges didn't squeak. She remembered the first morning she'd been waved off by strangers doing their jobs and felt the clean truth of it now: respect isn't a speech, it's a pattern. She signed the visitor sheet just to see how the pen rolled. Smooth. The small things were catching. McConnell called late to check in, the way retired commanders do when they still care. "You turned a corner," he said. "We all did," Ev answered. He laughed. "You don't take credit even when it's yours." "I take the next step," she said. He said keep going. She said copy. Before lights out, she wrote one more line on the board for the week ahead: rotate the new sergeants through a gate shift so every leader felt the strain and the pace where it all begins. She put the marker down and looked at the plan. It wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. Ironwood was steady. The town was calmer. The team was sharper. Problems still came, but the answers arrived faster. And when she left the office, the hallway felt like a place where people could do good work without waiting for someone to shout. Tomorrow would be another list, another loop, another gate at first light. That was fine. The base moved, the people held, and the job made sense in her hands, and that was the point she kept coming back to when anyone tried to make the work bigger than it was. A month turned into a season. Ironwood kept its pace without the drama. Ev woke before the sun, ran the perimeter, and walked the same route past the motor pool, comms, the clinic shed, and the gate. She stopped for 5 minutes at each place and asked a small question that forced a simple answer. What's late? What's light? What's next? It sounded basic. It worked. Fridays stayed open for junior slots. Riley came back with better notes and a steadier voice. "I don't lose my place when it gets noisy anymore," he said, almost surprised at himself. Becker's reports read clean and quiet. Grant had a team that needed fewer reminders and still ran toward the hard calls. McConnell wrote once more, just a line: "Good command is a habit." Ev wrote back, "Copy." She didn't overthink it. Habits held people when adrenaline wore off. There were days that tested those habits. A storm cut power to half the base and turned the access road into a shallow river. Ev didn't stand on a desk. She pointed at the list they had already built and walked it item by item. Generators, fuel, traffic control, clinic fridge temp checks, radio relays, gate status. People did their piece and then the next one. By nightfall the lights were back. No one needed a speech. Someone taped a hand-drawn lightning bolt on the ops board and wrote "nice try" next to it. Ev left it there. On a quiet Sunday, Diane and Robert came to visit. Ev met them at the small visitor lot, walked them through the admin hall, and out to the bleachers by the drill field. Robert watched a formation will in slow steps and nodded like a man who respected clean lines, whether on a fender or a parade ground. Diane squeezed Ev's hand. "You look tired, but it's a good tired," she said. Ev smiled. "It's the right tired." They didn't stay long. They never did. Before they left, Robert asked the same question. "Hinges quiet?" Ev said, "Listen." The gate swung smooth on cue. He gave a short nod that meant keep going. The town warmed, slowly and for its own reasons. The sheriff stopped by once without a problem to talk about road cones and school traffic. The clinic called ahead before a rush. The small stuff started to feel like muscle memory. Ev kept the line steady: "Tell us early, tell us straight, we'll meet you halfway." She didn't try to be everyone's friend. She tried to be predictable in the ways that mattered and flexible in the ones that didn't. When Riverstone invited her back to speak, she almost said no. Harding didn't ask for a speech. He sent a simple request: come show them what work looks like after the brass is packed away. So she went. She stood in front of a room full of cadets who looked like she used to, tired and keyed up at the same time. She told them what she wished someone had told her early: you don't have to be the loudest voice to be in charge, you have to be the clearest. You won't save the day with slogans, you'll save minutes with a checklist. You can carry people farther than you think if you never make them guess what right looks like. Keller waited by the door afterward and shook her hand without a smirk. You were right about routes, he said. She said, you were right about pace, and meant it. People change when the work is real. Back at Ironwood, the weeks kept stacking. Ev rotated new sergeants through the gate like she planned, and each one came back with the same respect for that post. They learned that leadership starts where the road meets the fence, not where the photos get taken. They learned a name, a plate, a pause, and a crisp call on the radio can hold a whole day together. Ev liked watching the lesson land without her having to sell it. The place sold itself when it ran right. If there was a moment that felt like closure, it came without planning. Early one morning she drove up in plain clothes again, the old folder on the seat out of habit, and the sky the same sharp blue as the first time she'd been waved off. Riley stepped out, squared up, and then caught himself with a small grin. Good morning, Colonel. No clipboard shuffle. No confusion. Just the right words in the right order. Becker raised the barrier. Ev rolled forward and stopped beside them. What's late? What's light? What's next, she said. Riley answered without looking down. Fuel run is on time, south cameras need a new lens at post 3, and next is a school visit at 10. Ev nodded. Copy. She parked, walked the center road, and listened to the bass breathe. Generators hummed. Forklifts ticked. A hello spooled up and then settled. People moved like they belonged. She thought about Maple Ridge, the grease under her nails on the day the Riverstone letter came, the winter field test when the map flipped and she kept going anyway, the ridge at Ridgewell and the long rehab nights, the convoy in the ravine, the pickup with the tarp that wasn't what fear said it was, and the first morning 2 guards told her she couldn't pass. None of it felt like a movie reel. It felt like a set of small, stubborn choices made in order. She didn't print a motto for the wall. She didn't need a plaque. If someone asked later what Ironwood learned under her watch, she hoped they'd say this: we learned to do the right thing once, the same way, on time. We learned that respect is a pattern, not a speech. We learned that gates matter because they're where you prove you can be fair and firm at the same time. When the day ended, Ev checked her board, erased one box, added another, and clicked off the light. On the way out, she stopped at the gate. The sun threw long shadows across the lane. Riley handed the clipboard to a new sergeant for training and let him take the call. Becker looked over and said, "See you in the morning, ma'am." Ev glanced at the hinges, listened to the quiet swing, and felt the same clean answer in her chest she'd been chasing since Riverstone. The work was good. The team was ready. The road ahead was clear. She put the truck in gear and rolled through, not because someone allowed it, but because she had earned the right to open that gate for others and keep it moving.